The Arrogant History of White Ben by Clemence Dane, Chapter 3, Callers. The Scarecrow, who had tilted forward during the night season, was still asleep when the child Ellie flung open her window. "Mother, can I get up?" But she did not wait for permission. Toasted with slumber, she slipped on a single undergarment and cotton frock, bustled downstairs to the kitchen singing, "Fire, fire, burn stick." And well, the kettle boiled. Dashed out into the garden to water the morning glories before the sun was too strong. But already the cinder path was hot and the blossoms wide open, and George shouted at her, "Leave 'em be! Do you want to blister 'em?" She came back. So back she came without a word to Ben, though she had roused him with her sprinkling. The Scarecrow waked sour and sore, furious at her neglect of him, at everyone's neglect of him. The cat got its milk, the plants their rain, the post girl swung past, flinging the paper over the gate. The woman stood at the back door, shouting to the gardener, and the gardener came hurrying with a bundle of firewood. Everybody thought of everybody else, but nobody thought of the Scarecrow. He was Ben, White Ben, but nobody knew it. Nobody cared. He, who had been so great a creature in the darkness, was now neglected, forsaken, forgotten. No incense rose from the campions. But at that moment there came floating up from the house another scent. It traveled toward him, level and penetrating, as the beams of yesterday's sunset. At the same moment the child reappeared in the doorway. "George!" "What is it?" "Mother says, have you had your breakfast, because we've got bacon." Bacon! The Scarecrow remembered perfectly the word, its sound and smell. Bacon! Hunger was the meaning of the ache about his heart. He found himself muttering, "Can't get decent bacon in France," and remembering the unintelligible answers. "Caw, caw!" Foreigners make more noise than a rookery. Well, his makers would soon be sorry that they had paid him so little attention. Once able to lift his foot clear of the campions and the morning glories, he would tramp down the cinder path. He would fling open the green door. He would plunge, on his own account, into the profound mystery of the dwelling. He would taste bacon. He would not be poor Ben then. He would be like all the other people who went so easily in and out of houses. But he could not as yet lift his foot clear. He wished, but could not will it unless someone watched and applauded. But everyone had forgotten him. Even his makers had forgotten him. George went up and down across the patch of lawn without a glance. Little Ellie ran in and out singing, but she did not come up the cinder path, and the woman was invisible. The morning wore to an end, the hours marked for him by phases of the morning glories. These small heavens mirrored all the way the diurnal history of the sky. Each, as it opened, was a turquoise-colored tent of silk, and in each tent a sun rose. Then, as the sky deepened to the true azure, the morning glories grew also more opaque, darkening as the sky darkened to the terrible cobalt of noon. Here and there they began also to be stained with thin crimson blood. Then came the quick end, the collapse of the silk tents into soft, wet bundles of lavender kid, which hung unnoticeable as more flowers opened, to repeat again and again the exquisite story of texture and tint. The marvel held the Scarecrow's eyes. Ravished by it, and watching over one flower from birth through life to nothingness, he was aware of a new sensation. He felt the famous sag of misery, hunger, heartache, the smart of tears. His garments recognized all three and communicated their knowledge, reinforcing his own new experience, till the Scarecrow hung heavy with sorrow for himself. This, then, it was to be alive. He had experienced so much in his brief span, yet moment by moment he became more aware of the heavy tasks still expected of him. The field was black with crows, yet the old gardener took no notice. Not once had he shouted or shaken his hoe. This was because he relied upon Ben to think and act for him. Everything was left to Ben. No one gave him comfort, understanding, or help. No one paused to consider how particularly difficult it was for a Scarecrow to do his duty. A gardener could hobble, a little girl could run, a woman could walk where she pleased. But White Ben stood pegged to earth, shackled by the dying morning glories. But he would not be defeated. As he looked up at the darkening sky, he saw that the wind had brought up a pall of cloud, which it was dragging across the blue, veiling the brightness, chilling the afternoon. He would use that wind. "Watch me now," muttered Ben, and with a groaning effort he twisted till he could rest his arms upon the next puff of the flaunting invisible. Cunning Ben achieved his purpose. The wind flapped him violently over toward the cornfields, and so vigorous was the flop of his 2 gloves, so loud the smack of his coat-tails, that all the crows lifted cawing. Again he flapped, and again the black pests conferred. Ben could not understand their foreign lingo, but it was plain that they were alarmed, for the leader shot up suddenly into the air, flung himself over the fence and orchard, and hurtled down into the cabbage beds. He was followed by the entire gang. Furious, White Ben swung over his socket, craning after them. He was in a fine rage. Flap, flap, whack! The delighted wind rose screaming encouragement. Smack, batter, flop, flop, screamed the scarecrow. Together they made so magnificent a commotion that the uneasy crows leaped into the air once more, lifted over the hedge, and sailed off down the hill out of Ben's sight. As he still waved his arms, screeching menaces, a horn sounded through their diminishing clamor. Then the little girl Ellie trotted out, and at once he prepared to be pacified. Here was service come running. Here was approval. Here was applause. But she did not look in his direction, though he danced again with outrage at her ignorant neglect of him. "George!" She put the gardener first, you see. "George! Mother wants you!" What it was to be wanted. The gardener took no notice. "George!" Her black eyes snapped, her bright hair burned. She was as imperious as the wind. "George, there's a car and people. You're to open the double gate. Do you hear me, old George?" At that, the gardener drew down his hoe and hobbled off round the side of the cottage, while the invisible car continued to honk for attention. Oh, to be able to make such sounds! Then the woman appeared in the back doorway, staring as she charmed her face with something round which she held in front of her, into which she looked, and among the morning glories, and luminous as their luminous centers, a disk appeared suddenly and danced. White Ben's attention was distracted by the phenomenon. The disk danced all over him, dazzling his eyes, and yet he could not feel it even when it settled moth-like upon his face. Meanwhile the woman continued to give her breathless orders, and with her, as always, the child was meek. "Get out the chairs, Ellie. It's Bus and Jenny. Look, Ellie. I'll take them straight out into the garden, so slip back into the house, will you, and get a surface on the place. And then put yourself straight. Make yourself look possible. Your hands are filthy." The dancing disc vanished from among the glories as the woman shut her flapjack with a snap and raced back into the house, leaving the door wide open. Ben found that through it, as through a tunnel, he could see out again. He had wondered if anything lay behind the cottage, or whether it had been stuck against the sky, flat as the paper on the notice board at the corner of the field. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." Now he knew that garden and air lay behind it. Now he knew as well as anybody whither the trespassing crows went when they flew down the hill and disappeared. Strange voices floated up toward him on the afternoon rays of sunshine. One was high as the woman's, but less fretful. Another, deep as the gardener's, and yet another sounded like a very young crow's complaining. The medley of sounds excited him. He peered and craned, using the weight of his free foot to swing himself sideways to command the center of the house. But just as the visitors came into sight, just as he had his first glimpse of a strange golden creature arm in arm with his own woman, who was smiling as he had never seen her, just as behind them he saw a stout elderly man between a couple of young ones, the wind turned against him. Never trust the wind, it changes its mind. Sometimes it helps a scarecrow against crows by carrying the sound of their cawing toward him before the black clatter is visible. Another time it blocks all sounds so that the crows are able to drop on him from above, pluck at his hat, and drive their beaks into his straw. Bad friend, worse enemy. Never trust the wind. Now it was taking Ben by the armpits. Now it veered him round to face the arid, the uninteresting field. Certainly the Scarecrow's job had been well done, for there was not one crow left in it. But he would not be able to see if the voices noticed that his job was well done. Till the wind changed, he could only listen hungrily for their comments. There was a clink of glasses, and the talking grew louder, the woman's voice dominating it. Yes, I've been here all through the war, at least since Rupert died. I had the cottage on a long lease. No, Rupert didn't leave anything, not even debts. My only rows with Rupert were over debts. What's the use of trying to save these days? But Rupert was hopeless. Sit here, Bus, won't you? Jenny, do you like dusty grass? Why must you always make yourself uncomfortable? I like to look at people, the other woman was speaking. The voice was lower and more decisive, yet eager and conciliating. No, nothing to drink. You take it, Teddy. Yes, you take it, Teddy, the woman of the house began again. And you know Arthur Latimer, don't you know? Said the other woman's voice. Arthur Latimer? Really? I thought we should probably meet one day. Nice. Will you get yourself a drink? Then the voice changed, softened into affection. Bus, I know how to mix for you, only you won't get any ice. Can you bear it? We're economical on this hilltop. You see, after Rupert was killed, I left London. There was no life at all in London, so I came down here. My small daughter likes it. Where is she? Ellie! Oh, well, she'll be out in a minute. Ellie! No, she can't hear me in this wind. You know this wind never stops, winter or summer, day or night. I hate it so. But White Ben blessed the deafening wind. For once more it came to him with a rush and swung him round, coat-tails flapping, so that he thought exaltedly, I fly. This is men's flight. Now let them tumble up into the sky as they please. The crows shan't escape me. The blue sky, the white circle of horizon, swirled about him as he dipped. Then the blue discs of the morning glories rose up at him in turn, so that he saw a dozen tossing small horizons, blue striped with white, and was bewildered. Again the wind lifted his arms. Again it swung him. He felt his foot loosen in the soil. The socket in which he rested was widening. It crumbled under his instep. Oh, soon he would be able to lift his foot. Then, as suddenly as he had been attacked, he was released. He staggered, shook a little, and was still. So for an instant he remained, disassociated from his surroundings, aware only of the lessening voice of the wind. Then sight and hearing cleared, and he forgot wind and crows as he sated his newborn curiosity. Here were creatures wilder than the wind. The gardener he knew and held in awe. The woman was a familiar shape and sound. The child had touched him. He knew her best of all. At each touch of her young fingers he had experienced an uneasy charmed shivering, just as he did when the tendrils of the morning glories tightened on his ankle. But these new creatures were beyond his knowledge, and he craned forward from his base to see them more clearly. And we will pause there.